So you can find more of those brochures on your tables as well. But now is the time, and this is one of the brilliance of the Australian Lebanese Chamber of Commerce, is that they bring for you brilliant speakers. And consistently those speakers have opinions, they need to be listened to, they are very senior leaders in this nation. And so I have enormous pleasure in welcoming to the stage the Chief Executive of Westpac, Anthony Miller. Just check, you're on, aren't you?
Hi.
Very good, right. Okay, so we start here with the journey. Anthony, why the hell are you the boss of Westpac? Can I ask you that? Can I just make an observation here? You studied law at Queensland University of Technology. You then go on and get a Bachelor of Arts in Japanese Language and Modern Asian Studies from the Griffith University. You were going to be a diplomat. You were going to be something else. You were going to be working for the United Nations. You weren't going to be the chief executive of Westpac. Where did the U-turn come in your life?
Great question. I sort of finished high school in 1988, and in Queensland at the time, Japan was the dominant emerging economic powers, #2 economy in the late 80s, just behind the United States, and it just felt like Japan was where it had to be. And so I studied Japanese, and I had every intention at the end of university of going to work in Japan, or at least something like that. And for various reasons, I just didn't get there. And I practiced as a lawyer for a couple of years, and that was in Brisbane. And then I was given an opportunity to come to Sydney. And I joined a law firm in Sydney, and after a couple of years, one of the investment banks said, you should be a banker, not a lawyer. And so I moved into banking, and I started in that in 98, 99.
Okay, so you start there as a banker and off you go, you've got law. How's your Japanese these days?
It's pretty ordinary. I certainly, apparently my wife tells me I do speak Japanese in my sleep, so, but that's normally reflects that I'm overtired but anyway, it's not very good.
Take a step back from that. Before you got to university, the family, where did they grow up? In Brisbane or on the farm? Where did they go?
So I'm the eldest of 6. I had a very unusual upbringing. I'm the eldest of 6 children. We moved an enormous amount as a family. My dad was originally in the army and got a scholarship after the army and got a law degree himself, and we moved around and did various things. And so I went to 10 schools over 12 years, and I finished my last 2 years of high school in Brisbane, and that's sort of, if you will, the story. And it's a family that was obsessed about sport. My father was, and my mother were very focused on you needed to participate in sport and you needed to compete in sport, and if you did it, you had to do it to your best ability. My best ability wasn't particularly good, but my sister won a gold medal at the Olympics, and my brother was an Olympic boxer, and he won a gold medal at Manchester Commonwealth Games, and my other brother played professional rugby, so they left me nothing in the gene cupboard.
Right, so you had to find another sort of go-to, as it were. Yeah. And as it turns out, that's banking, but that's not even a direct course as well. Yeah. There's a period at Goldman Sachs, for example. There's a period at Deutsche, I think there was as well. So there's a bit of a sort of a journey before you actually get into Australian banking.
That's right. I was working, I had the privilege of working at Goldman's for a long time. I was working for them in Asia. Decided to come back to Australia and then was invited to be Chief Executive of Deutsche Bank in Australia, which was, again, a real privilege. And after working at Deutsche Bank for a few years, I was co-head of Asia, and so I was travelling an enormous amount, and then COVID arrived and I was in lockdown, and I just realised I wanted to spend a lot more time just being much more present and much more, if you will, engaged with family than I was, because I was always travelling. And so I made a decision to leave investment banking, and I wasn't sure what I would do. And I was a very serendipitous moment, because literally in the week that I decided, you know what, I'm not going to continue in investment banking, Peter King at Westpac reached out and said, would you be interested in joining us and running the institutional business? And even in the best of times, I would have been interested in doing that. And
so I was going to say, so that whole idea of trying to be with your family, that was a great idea, but I'm guessing being the chief executive of Westpac, it's not so good in reality these days.
I'm certainly busy. I think the difference is that I'm certainly not travelling overseas all the time, and I'm able to get home almost every evening, so that's a positive. But yeah, as I say, it's a wonderful privilege to be chief executive of Westpac, and my first 6 months, 12 months are going to be very intense, and I'm fully committed. And then in time, I'd like to hope I find the balance that's needed to obviously make sure I stay engaged with family.
Okay, so Anthony, there's one other aspect of this, because the history would generally tell you that with most large Australian banks, the chief executive would have generally previously been the head of their retail bank. But you were the head of not just the institutional bank, but then the business side of the banking operations. So just take me through that transition, and is it necessary to really have that retail experience to run one of our big four banks?
Look, I don't doubt that having some retail experience, having some experience in retail banking is helpful, but I don't think it's the condition precedent to the job. It's about being very clear about how we are going to take the company forward. And the idea that we service our customers, whether it's an institutional customer, a business bank, a small business bank, or a consumer customer, it's the same set of values in terms of, are you clear and do you understand what they need? Are you listening to them? Are you responding to their requirements? And so how do I ensure that the team and that the systems in the bank are set up to do that? That's the same exam question whether they're running institutional business, a small business model, or consumer.
So Westpac came through the Banking Royal Commission relatively unscathed compared with other banks, it would be fair to say. No bank was completely unscathed. Yeah. Westpac, in relative terms, was relatively unscathed. But then, of course, came the AUSTRAC penalty, $1.4 billion. It was a massive reputational blow, cost the job of a chief executive and of a chair of the organisation. So given all of that, do you think that the bank has recovered fully from those really sort of, if you like, tremors, those massive tremors that went through the organisation?
Yes, I do. But I would say that the pain and, if you will, the challenges remain, because for Westpac, it's Australia's oldest bank. It's Australia's oldest company. And the affection that the people at Westpac have and the entire Westpac group have for the company is quite extraordinary. And so those errors, those mistakes, which were not deliberate, which obviously were well and truly documented and aerated back in 2019, leading to a very large fine from AUSTRAC, really did cut to the core of many people at Westpac in the group. And so it's been a real exercise over the last 4 or 5 years of, first of all, dealing to those problems, addressing them, repairing, restoring, and regaining, if you will, the confidence and the trust of both the people at Westpac and the community. And I feel like we're starting to emerge from that, and we're very focused now on how are we going to go further and faster in providing a better service to our customers and providing better solutions to our customers. And in a way, the company is now starting to be much more outwardly looking in what it's trying to do and what it wants to represent in the community. Okay,
so then we have a productivity and economic roundtable coming up in the coming week from the Prime Minister. Just one question, Fro. From those days of the Royal Commission, there was quite clearly a very onerous set of regulations that came upon our major banks and insurance companies in this country. The big question as we go through trying to improve productivity, it seems as though Australia has way too many rules. Is this something that now troubles you? Where is the balance between making certain that people feel there are enormous safeguards around our big institutions versus having way too many that really curb the ability to do business?
Look, I think that's a great question, and I think that is one of the most important opportunities or challenges sitting in the productivity roundtable set of meetings. I don't think anyone, and we certainly don't advocate for deregulation. Like, what we need is effective, efficient, transparent regulation orientated around a purpose and outcome. And what has set this country apart for almost its entire history is being a place where capital and talent wants to come. And good capital and good talent wants to come to an environment where there's good regulation, but it's transparent and it's efficient and it inspires you to reach a level of excellence. And what we need to do is to say to ourselves, is the regulatory settings we have, the amount of regulation we have, geared to ensuring we can compete for capital and talent? And are we setting it up such that it's delivering on what we want for the community? And so, for example, there's an aspiration to build 1.2 million houses in this country, which is a fantastic opportunity. Employment, jobs, growth, economic activity that follows from that. But we need to make sure that every regulator, every regulatory setting and every member of community that has influence on that is of the understanding that they need to help us get to 1.2 million houses. And so we need to have a mandate, we need to have a purpose around our regulation. And that's one of the things that I think you'll see emerge from this roundtable is there's a real broad consensus that it's not the amount of regulation, it's the way we're going about it and the way it is being, if you will, implemented is what's impeding a lot of what we can achieve.
Okay, I'm going to do two things here. First off, there's a lot of people in the housing industry in this room, but broadly a lot of business people in this room. Stick your hand up if you think it's harder to do business today than it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Pick a number, whatever you reckon. Is it harder? Is it easier? Right? Harder? Well, I got about half the room. Easier. Who says easier? I've got crickets, right? So it's harder broadly to do business these days. One of the issues about even the productivity and economic roundtable that the government will do is already there seems to be a division between the Prime Minister and the Treasurer as to what the aspirations and aims of it are. What troubles me is that we might find out what the problems are, but we won't know how to implement the solutions. Isn't that one of the fundamental issues here in Australia, that the actual lawmaking is so glacially slow?
Well, look, first of all, I think the very fact that we are having a productivity roundtable, the fact that both sides of politics, business, union leaders, everyone is talking about productivity is a major win. You've got to get everyone galvanised around the challenge and an agreement on what the challenge is in front of us. So I think there's huge progress that's been made already. And I think if you look at the Prime Minister and his team, he is very focused on building some consensus around what we might do. He got an exceptional mandate from the electorate in the last election, and this wasn't in front of the electorate in the last election. So he's very focused on how do I build some consensus around what we might do. The thing that I would say is that, there are one or two areas where I think everybody's in agreement, which is let's have this approval process, let's have this regulatory setting much more streamlined. And so I'm hopeful that we'll get some consensus around one or two or three things that can be done and be done quite quickly and efficiently. And that hopefully inspires everyone in terms of what we can do when we gather and we agree what we're going to go after. I do think, though, the discussion around tax reform is potentially a challenge, because that'll crowd out what I think we should be focusing on is all those things we can do, that we can get after now, implement now to really drive the economy forward. And if we can deliver on those, then let's come back and really work on a more substantive, holistic review of the tax regime.
Because you recognise there is a philosophy since Bill Shorten went to the polls and lost inside the Labor Party to halve the capital gains tax discount, to reduce the benefits of negative gearing, to really perhaps even implement, as a productivity commissioner suggested, a tax on revenue of our major companies. The question is, raising taxes in any way, shape or form, or taking away support, is that any way to make the country more competitive and more productive?
Well, certainly I think there's other things that we can and should go after now, because I don't think it's realistic to think that we can build the right level of consensus in the community and across all those constituents we need to build on tax reform to be able to get after it, at least in the next 24, 36 months. And so therefore I'd be much more focused on what can we do, because what we need to do is to get moving. We need to respond to the opportunity that sits in front of this country now by putting in place those reforms that we can get done and then build some momentum. And as I say, the fact that we're all aligned around the need to build 1.2 million houses, or the need to get the energy grid transition to a lower emissions level is in front of us. Let's get all the approvals in place. Let's streamline that process and then get the country moving on that, and then come back to some of these other more substantial challenges.
Okay, then take me to the bank itself. Tell me about how you would hope to achieve the streamlining of exactly those things. Approvals, of trying to get a business deal across the line, about trying to compete for that business deal in the very first place. Just the speed with which people in this room can do business with our banks has historically been pretty slow as well.
That's a very fair challenge, and that is something that is in front of me in terms of what are we going to do to make it easier for us to partner with you when you need finance or you need banking services. One of the things that we're very focused on is how do we get in place all of the approvals and all of the policies and all the processes and streamline them. And we're working actively on that at the bank. Some of the things we're doing now, which is in relation to our small business and small medium enterprise market set, is if they've got a transactional account with the bank, we're able to understand their cash flow and their cash flow needs over a period of time and observe patterns and understand where their businesses are at. And what that's then meant is that we can pre-approve what commitments we would otherwise be able to make. And so rather than you needing to come in and say, could I please have a loan, our plan and what we are able to do and what we are already doing is going to you and saying, based on your current financial performance, we can and are able to commit to you X dollars. And so trying to, if you will, shift the onus away from please establish for us why you should be lent money to we would like to lend you money, but we understand your business, we understand the risks of your business and we're ready now to commit to you.
I don't want to take you back to this because I know it's not a great time for any bank in Australia, but the lead up into the Banking Royal Commission and many of the stories in there were about the way in which banks treated customers, and in particular business people and farmers, when they were actually going broke. Now, you've come in as Chief Executive at a time when bad and doubtful debts are at historic lows for the banks. But there is a point in time when every Chief Executive of a bank has to basically let a business go through. How do you do that? How do you work that out in your mind? Having run the business bank at Westpac, you've faced this in the past. How do you go through that process when a business is going bad or is going broke?
So we are a regulated institution, so in terms of when there is stress, there is certain processes and protocols that we are required to follow as a result of being a regulated bank with a licence to operate as a bank. So that's one discipline or constraint that always impacts how we handle that. But I think you're right about something that I think is very important for me, very important for the team at Westpac and some of the team here today, is that what our commitment is and what our focus has got to be is to be there for our customers through the entire cycle, like to work with you as your partner to make sure you get to the right place. And so that's one of the things that we are focusing on is how do we ensure that each of our bankers, particularly our business bankers, our commercial bankers, are empowered and are equipped to be able to support their customers and make sure that even in those difficult moments, and perhaps most importantly when it's difficult, to stand by our customers. I had a customer come to me about 6 months ago. He and his family has been with the company over 180 years. Okay, so they're in the agricultural business. And he described to me how in the early 70s, with his father, he went into the bank manager at Westpac in a regional town, and we're still there, by the way, in that regional town. And there was an enormous challenging drought on, and he and his father went in, and his father said, look, I'm going to need 24 months of cover here to get through. And the bank manager said, well, you've been banking with us forever. You are good at your job, you're good at, we trust you, and gave approval in the moment. And then as a result, they got through the worst drought, and then now they have some of the largest, most successful land holdings in the world, let alone in Australia. And it was because at their toughest moment, we were there for them, that they've stayed loyal to us. And it's been a wonderful partnership now that's, we'll be celebrating a 200-year anniversary with them in a couple of years' time.
Which is a great...
So that's where I want us to be, which is that bank that partners with you and gets you through and supports you through those difficult moments. Now, that doesn't mean it's carte blanche in every single instance that is going to be the case, because as you respect and expect, this is a regulated bank and I have certain disciplines that are imposed upon me that also I need to be sensitive to and thoughtful about.
Yeah. What about the government's role in companies and industries that are going bad? We've had Rex Airlines, we've got the Wireless Steelworks, we've now got just about every other foundry, aluminium smelter, we've got the steelworks, we've got just about every energy-intensive business in Australia lining up at the government's door saying, we need a bailout. At what point does the government have to step back like a bank and let the business go broke? Is this a healthy thing in what is a very open economy otherwise?
Look, I think it's that's a very, very tough question and a real challenge for society and for Australia, because I think what has, if you will, underpinned a lot of success is we've tried things, we've failed, and then there's rebirth and renewal, so to speak. And the fact that the expectation is if it's difficult, you can and will get support from government or otherwise is probably an unsustainable expectation. The only thing I'd caution, though, is that in the environment that we're in at the moment, this world that we are operating in, the idea that industries and certain capabilities must be maintained as we have a deglobalising agenda and a much more balkanised environment, geopolitically and economically, you've got to stand back and say, but you know what, it is probably smart and against our true instincts, but it is smart to support a business such as a refinery, such as a steelworks, because that's appropriate for Australia's long-term economic and military and other security requirements. And so, therefore, it's the right question, but it's not easily answered, and I think it requires everyone to take a step back and be thoughtful about the different pressure points that are arriving on government. The one thing we should, though, acknowledge is that I think when COVID arrived, Australia and the government response in that first 6 months was magnificent. You know, the country came together, we looked after community, we looked after everybody, but arguably it may have gone on longer than perhaps should have. And then as a result, we've created this situation where perhaps there's an unrealistic expectation that every problem must be solved by government, and therefore we need to perhaps start to restore some balance.
All right, then there's one other thing that troubles me a little bit, and that is we are now, 36 months, might as call it 6 months or so. We're about 30 months until the next election, and yet it strikes me in my mind that it's only 20 months ago that ChatGPT launched. And since then, we've seen an unholy boom in the chip manufacturers. NVIDIA suddenly went from being a maker of chips for games, for electronic games, to suddenly becoming the biggest company in the world. And so that's 20 months ago to where we are today, where every company is now accelerating to basically implement artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence. And there are programs coming, and I was at a Google event last week that was massive on this. So 30 months into the future is perhaps the next election, but 20 months, you don't know where the world will be. What I wonder is about the speed of government, whether it's simply not moving quickly enough, even in particular taking up solutions that may come from the productivity and the economic roundtable. If we have to wait until the next election, we're going backwards, we're not going forwards.
Yeah, and again, that remains that challenge that sits in front of us. I think it is the case that we are in a Western liberal democracy, and they don't tend to be able to move as fast as perhaps people would like, or certainly alternative forms of government can sometimes utilise. But that's the price of the democracy we have. But more importantly, that's why I think the agenda, like the productivity roundtable, is a way of starting to now get some consensus, get some agreement, and therefore why I think it's really important to not go too far and try to do something too bold where you just know it's going to be too hard to get everyone together, but to get some realistic and some achievables done now and build some momentum and build some confidence in terms of getting things done and moving the country forward.
Okay, I've got a couple more questions for you, just, little left of field ones for you. As the Chief Executive now, I mean, you're in an isolated position in many ways. You are the bank, you are the face of the bank. Trying to make certain that what you have as a policy, your team has as a policy, goes down to the very furthest reaches of your bank. Does that trouble you? Because any of your troubles may be happening at other parts of the bank that may be almost invisible to you, to the board, to your senior management team. How do you overcome that communication gap?
So a great question, probably the toughest question that sits in front of me as the Chief Executive of the bank, and I thought Salim's introductions were spot on in terms of, looking at that tragedy that was the Concorde, and ultimately, wherever you go, notwithstanding the technology, notwithstanding the processes, it comes down to your people. It comes down to the quality of your people, it comes down to the values they have, and it comes down in particular to their managers and their leaders, and how are they equipped to inspire, motivate and challenge their teams. And so that's where we have to go. And so what we're very focused on is how do I, in this age where it's all automated, a lot more technology, a lot more digital, AI will augment all of that. Ironically, it puts more pressure on getting it right with your people, because that is going to be the difference, and that's going to be what we have to solve if we're going to make sure that the person in some operation miles away from the head office thinks about and understands the values that are important and makes that choice and that decision based on a set of values and a set of rules that we agree is the right way for the company. And they have to embrace that. And so that's the challenge for us, is how do I make sure that everyone is aligned with us on what we stand for and how we want to behave and how we want to deliver ourselves every day. And so last thing I would say on that topic is definitely there's lots of things that I'm very excited about and lots of excitement about AI. But as we think about it, the AI is this wonderful tool, and it's only going to be as good as the people at the bank. And it's only going to be as good as their ability to use that tool. And so I've got to spend more time, money and effort on our people than I ever have, even though we're going into a highly more automated digital world.
Okay, so when I see internationally, Google laying off 30,000 people, Microsoft laying off 15,000 people, Meta laying off 50,000 people, this type of numbers are coming out almost on a regular basis. Does Australia have to wake up to the reality that some jobs, because of artificial intelligence, are going to disappear? And the second question is, what will those jobs be replaced with?
So I think that remains in front of us in terms of really sort of identifying what will happen as a result of AI. There's no doubt that it has an enormous role to play, and there's no doubt that it's going to change how we do things. And then I think it is the case that some jobs will be lost. But like we've seen in every other evolution or revolution, technology or otherwise inspired, some jobs are lost or some skills are no longer required, but so many other skills and so many other capabilities are required. And so you continue to see more opportunity than more concern in terms of what it could mean for Australia. And so I think what we should be thinking about in terms of AI is definitely there will be some roles that are no longer needed, but there's going to be a lot more other jobs, I think, created, and a lot more work will have to be done around all of the infrastructure that supports an AI-centric, AI-utilising economy. And so, for example, we need a lot more power generation, we need a lot more storage of power, we need a lot more investment in how we're going to manage data centres if we are going to realise the potential of that particular tool.
Okay, so as we talk about the evolution of our economy, there's one other thing that is evolving as well that I want to ask you about. And I apologise in advance to this room, this whole audience, the Australian Lebanese Chamber of Commerce. I apologise to each and every one of you in this room, because it's taken my notice that Lebanese business people particularly like cash. They like lots of cash, right? Now, I don't know why they like lots of cash, and I know it's not particular to this room, but I do know that the Lebanese business community in Australia likes cash, lots of it. Now, the world these days, as we know, is going to these things, right? You tap it, or you watch, or whatever. Cash has always been a really important element of the business community, and particularly the Lebanese business community. Don't know why. You can tell me why, but I don't know why. So, given the fact that we're using less cash in our community, yet surprisingly there's record numbers of $50 and $100 bills in circulation. Wonder where that cash is. Don't know. I'll ask the room. So, Anthony, can you tell me this? Whose job is it to pay for the cash in our society these days?
Well, so definitely the cash ecosystem in Australia is under a lot of pressure, because its business model was predicated on the storage and transport of cash between various points in the community and the economy, when cash represented 50, 60, 70% of how you paid for things. Now cash is down to less than 6 or 7% of how we pay for things, with obviously everything done digitally. And so therefore the challenge for us is to work with Armaguard and the cash in transit and storage community about how do we reorganise that ecosystem to make sure that cash can still be transported and stored in the ways that we use, because it's still the case that we want to use it, but we have to set it up such as a better business model. Now, what that will mean,
so I was going to ask you, because this is
everyone will end up contributing indirectly or directly to that new business model as we go forward, because two or three things will follow. One is it will cost a little bit more about storage and transporting cash, and so how that's distributed will be as it's always been distributed, based on negotiation and contracts, etc., and sharing of risk. But equally, the fact that cash is picked up every single day in a particular supermarket or a particular branch may not be the case going forward, and it'll be picked up once a month. And so all of a sudden then that will require different habits from everyone in how they think about and use cash in the community.
See, there's a parallel here with the post office, with Australia Post, and with the letter deliveries. Somebody's actually going to pay for that, so that doesn't get covered by the price of stamps. So in this particular case, the cash has got to be paid for. But then the question is, unlike a card or using my phone, where I'm charged immediately, or the retailer's charged immediately for that transaction, with cash still, there is no physical charge when you hand it over. So the question is, how does the community pay? And given the fact that we haven't all gone to cryptocurrency yet, the fact of the matter is that somehow that payment has got to be not only passed on to banks such as yours, but then in turn into the community to allow that cash to actually still be alive.
So it certainly won't be, I think, the case that consumer will see, oh, using cash, so there's an extra charge. I don't think that's where we end up. But the simple fact is that it currently costs Westpac in the order of $400 million a year to help move cash around the country and store cash in storage centres, in vaults, so that cash can be taken out of the ATM or taken out of the branch or picked up from the store and banked on behalf of the store back in the company. And so that's a cost of how we run the bank. And so therefore, I suppose the cost of that ultimately comes back into community, whether it be in fees for particular services or interest rates that we can, or interest that we charge, or interest rates that we might be able to pay on deposits. We absorb that in the way we run the bank. So that's in effect how it operates today, and it will be the case going forward. The challenge will be, how do we make sure that cash remains part of how the community wants to operate, and how do I make sure it's sustainable for the community going forward?
Okay, just a final one from me. I know that the talk of cash got the room excited. I can hear you actually starting to buzz just a little bit. So settle down a touch, because I think this is the other one you'll want to know about as well. And that is, you have got one of the really great economists. I mentioned Paul Bloxham from HSBC before, he's one of them, but you've got Lucy Ellis, who was a former Assistant Governor of the Reserve Bank in charge of its economics team. She's your chief economist. Now, I don't necessarily have to put it on you, because you can put it back on to Lucy. The Reserve Bank in its modelling right now says that there will be 3 more interest rate cuts by the middle of next year. Where does Westpac, where does Lucy Ellis sit on this? And then a little kicker to that. Is cutting interest rates a sign of a healthy economy or an economy that's not going so well?
Wow. I would say, first of all, Lucy is outstanding, brilliant. I think I've got the best independent chief economist of any institution in the country. Her forecast is, unless it's changed in the 3 hours that I've been here, is 3 more interest rate cuts, November, February, and then May next year. I think one of the things, though, that we need to be cognizant of is, the Governor has been incredibly clear and direct that it is data dependent. And so I think there's so many variables and so many competing pressures out there in the economy at the moment that while our forecast is 3, I think there's a risk that it's more closer to 2, albeit I'm not the chief economist. My chief economist is currently forecasting 3.
Very good. All right, so that is it. Now, what we're going to do is going to take a few questions from the room. So if there are questions from the room, we'll take them from you now. Don't be shy, because you know the rules here when I'm running these lunches, and that is, if you don't ask a question, I will actually point at you. I'm going to point right now at Paul Bloxham, the Chief Economist of HSBC. Paul.
Dragged up here, more than happy to ask a question though. Dragged up here, more than happy to ask a question. Great presentation, great set of questions, Ross, as always. So I guess two aspects. One is, In your perspective, what do you think are the primary constraints on getting businesses to be willing to make expansion plans? Because right now, if you look at non-mining business investment, so we abstract from the mining sector for the moment, it's been tracking sideways for a number of years. So what are the primary constraints there in terms of getting businesses to be willing to actually step up and do more investment? And on a related sort of way, because I suspect this is the direction of travel, what chances do you ascribe to the likelihood that next week's economic roundtable in Canberra is going to deliver some of the things that might help that happen?
Well, I think I'd start with the second question first. I think the roundtable is already making a contribution because we're getting everyone together and everyone is discussing and challenging themselves on what is the productivity initiatives we can undertake. And I just think having a better public discourse on the topic is just really, really, really critical. And so I think we're up and running on that. The key will be prioritising the hundreds of ideas down to 1, 2, 3 or 5 that we really can get around that will make a substantive difference. In terms of what do I think and what are we seeing, if I look at the performance of our business banking and institutional banking businesses, they are growing. And so we have a lot of our customers looking to invest and we have seen growth in our loan books in both business bank and institutional banking that's quite high. In fact, very pleasingly high with high quality borrowers looking to invest in their businesses. I do think one of the things that is critical on the non-mining side is that certainty of policy outlook, that confidence that there is a period of time in which you can make the investment and start to realise your returns without change, without excessive change. And funnily enough, the re-election of the government in May was a pretty interesting signal to Australia and to people wanting to invest in Australia compared to almost any other country in the world. Not many other countries in the world in the last year or two have re-elected a government where there's a continuity. Now, you don't have to have a view on the politics to say and acknowledge that a continuity is a really good thing for business and a certainty is a really good thing for business. And so we have, if you will, some of the foundations there to go after it. But I think the idea of being much more prescriptive about the priorities that we want the regulators to help us go after would be really, really helpful.
All right, more questions, please. Throw your hand up. It's a really big room with very few questions. Otherwise, I'll start. There's one right out the back here. Thank you very much. I'll take that one. I can take this one next, the question you've got. Thank you.
Okay, we heard that CBA are rolling out AI. CBA is rolling out AI. Now, apart from headhunting key personnel, what is Westpac answer to CBA? That's A. B, how do we see the benefit to the consumer and how is that going to affect future employment within Westpac and other consultants such as lawyers and so forth?
Yeah. So AI is obviously transformational. I would say the hype is out of all proportion, but its potential is enormous. Second thing is that, AI is but the evolution of things that we have been doing for a very long time. Machine learning, data analytics, data interpretation, pattern identification, and extrapolating what that might mean for customer or particular circumstance. And so AI is that next evolution. So we are using it. Where we're finding it really, really valuable today, and one of the examples I'll give you is in our scams centre. When people call into the scam centre, it's an emotional, volatile and very challenging phone call because people are calling in because they feel they may have been scammed or defrauded and they're very anxious. And so what we've got is an AI capability or chat capability which sits alongside my call centre personnel, and as words are used by the consumer or the customer, as sentences come through, it is helping the call centre respond and understand what actually they're really saying. They're using words which intimate that actually what they're really worried about is this. And so it's helping my call centre operators help the customer in that moment and do it to a standard that's the best you could possibly be in the moment. And the real charm of that is that we're getting consistency and we're getting those calls done faster and we're getting the customer to a safe point much faster. And so the productivity equation there is, as scams grow, as all of those threats continue to grow, I haven't had to put more people into the scam centre. I've just got people who, with this tool, are much more efficient. So where we will go is very much how do we use it to help our staff become better and do better more consistently with whether that be internal or external facing roles.
Good stuff. Okay, I'm going to take 2 more questions from this side of the room. I've got one right on the edge there. Thank you so much.
Hi. Looks like it's on. There was conversation in the past about removing surcharges on credit cards, which obviously would help everyone in this room to be able to pay for things on credit. Is that still something the bank is looking at?
So
Removing surcharge on credit cards?
So the RBA has released its proposal, which we supported, which is the removal of surcharging on debit cards. They've also now expanded it to cover credit cards. And so we understand that. And so we would expect that reform will come through in the course of the next 6 months, particularly as Parliament's resumed. And the idea would be that you cannot add a surcharge, and so therefore that gives the consumer certainty when they're paying for their goods or service. What it doesn't change is the fact that the cost of the payment system, the cost of the terminals, the cost of all of how that infrastructure is provided will remain, and so therefore that will be absorbed, whether it be by the business or the bank or the fintech that's providing the service in that particular way.
All right, one final question. I've got it out here. Thank you very much.
How does it work? Look, I'd just like to ask, what is the future with the branches that people have personal communication with? Because a lot of branches have been closing for many years. So I just wanted to know, with AI and everything that's happening, will there be a lot more closures of Westpac branches that people like the personal communication?
But before you answer that, when was the last time you went in a bank branch?
About a month ago.
A month ago, right? Anybody been inside of a month? Put your hand up if you've been inside a bank branch inside a month. Anybody not been at a bank branch for 12 months? Anybody not been in a bank branch for 2 years? 3 years? Yeah. You get the view, don't you, right? So what role do they play?
So it is an interesting challenge for us. So just so everyone knows, 96% of what people do with the bank is now done online.
Yeah.
And so the model is different now because customers, consumers have a different way they want to interact with us. Only 3% of what people do is happening in a branch. What we've worked out though, and what we're really working harder to get really right, is that what we want is the best combination of the physical offering, the virtual offering, so the call centre, and the digital online. And more importantly, they've got to work really well together. And so 2 things have come out of that work. One, which is we do think a physical presence in the community is really important. So our ambition, our aspiration is not to further reduce the number of branches we have, but very much it's going to be the case that the branch is different to how you would have seen a branch classically set up. And we're seeing that very much the case in regional Australia, and we're reopening operations in regional Australia so that people have that physical presence.
Well, that's good. They need that.
And so that's a positive, and that works in those areas. And in the cities, the work will be, well, what's the best way for that community to be serviced? And it might be not a big branch, but a smaller physical premise makes the most sense for that community. And we're just going to work that out. And over the next 3 to 5 years, we'll methodically arrive at what's the right optimal model going forward.
Because St George and Westpac, they use the same, very much so, in those branches now too.
Correct, yeah. And so one of the things you would have seen is we've co-located a St George branch and a Westpac branch. They sit on the same street. We're paying 2 pieces of rent. If we put them in the same building, it just reduces our rental costs. It means I've also got quality staff who can help on either side of that divide.
Yeah.
And so that's part of just the common sense approach to setting up our branches.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to leave it there. So can I just say, put your hands together, please, for Anthony Miller, Chief Executive at Westpac. That's a great chat, Anthony. Thank you so much. Sit tight there. Sit tight there because I now want to call on Joseph Risk, AM. You all know Joseph. He's been around for so many years. Come up on the stage to give our guest speaker, Anthony Miller, a vote of thanks. So much.
Thanks, Ross. Just before I do thank Anthony, I think it's appropriate to thank Ross for his professionalism. Year after year, Ross has supported the Lebanese Chamber, and we are so grateful, Ross, for your support and your efforts. Well done. Thank you. Also, congratulations to the Chamber. This is 40 years, right? You've seen some of the earlier photos that were put up. Now, 40 years of strong performance doesn't just come about. It's the dedication of the board, the members, the sponsors. So thank you very much to every one of you. Thank you. An event like this doesn't just happen, right? Year after year, event after event, we've got the likes of Michael Moore, who's a director, runs around, coordinates it, but Nadia and Tanya also provide excellent support. So I want to thank you, and I know the directors want to thank you enormously. Well done. Anthony, you covered it so well, right? As a banker that's been in banking for 51 years, I can tell you that we've seen cycles before. We've seen where change can occur. And we can see when people don't adapt to that change, really sort of move on. This is a great opportunity at the moment. We're in a great country. And hopefully next week, that round table has King Arthur sitting at the table, so that, you know, he puts his sword on the table and says, we've got to get things done. And we can. This country is fantastic. Every one of you have made a great contribution to this country over so many years. We've seen the good times. We've seen the hard times as well, but we've managed them. So, Anthony, your views and the way you've summarised it, you know, as a banker, I know that there's some challenges there, reality, but we have to grab them. And you've shown us today that a positive attitude is what it takes. So from us, from everyone here, we thank you for the time you've taken today to come here and share those values and some of those insights that I think will carry us going forward. So can I ask you all to put your hands together and thank Anthony for his time.
And just before you go, can I just call back Salim Nicholas, who was here a little earlier, and if you can come forward, Salim, I think you've got a presentation.
Firstly, I'd like to thank Mr. Anthony Miller. I think Joseph summed it all. I just want to thank those people behind organizing such a great speaker, Martin, Joseph, James, Larissa, and all the others, and of course the board. Thank you so much for making it such a successful event today. Thank you so much. Just a small souvenir from us to remember us over the years, and hopefully it's to your liking.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just open it. Don't worry.
Fantastic.
It's actually a medal from the Perth Mint commemorating 40 years of ALCC. It's actually full silver with gold plating.
It's stable coin.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Okay.
For you. Also, I'd like to present something for Ross. Ross, I think you're going to like this. It's a single malt whiskey. You've always asked for one. Thank you. Time and time again, you make it such an interesting event. Over the years, we could have had some boring speakers, but you always make it such interesting. Thank you so much.
Can I just make the observation? I come along here for the Callington Mill, right? The whiskey is fantastic, one of the best whiskies in the world, made in Tasmania, an Australian-made whiskey. It's fantastic. I've had a few bottles of these over the years. They always go down very well. And who's the owner of that business, by the way? Who would that be? Would that be Salim? That would be you, wouldn't it? That's exactly right. It's brilliant. Thank you so much.